Welcome to the Evolution 2.0 podcast, where we explore the intersection of art, technology, business, biology, and spirituality. Here you'll discover new trends in evolution that are changing the way we think about everything. This is your host, Perry Marshall, author of Evolution 2.0, 80/20 Sales and Marketing, and Guides to Ethernet, Google, and Facebook. I'm founder of the Evolution 2.0 Prize, a quest for the missing link between earth science, the information age, and life itself. Let's join the conversation now. Donna Meyers is 86 years old and has had a form of cancer called MDS for 35 years. She was diagnosed when she was in her 50s, and despite all of that, she looks 20 years younger than she really is. And in this conversation, we discuss how she has survived and thrived under the care of some very unusual and special people. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Donna.
And after the bone marrow biopsy, he said, "You have MDS." And I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he said, "Well, there is no cure. And there's no question that you will die, but it's very, very slow. And it will happen over a number of years, but it's a very slow growing disease." And I thought, oh my God, you're just sort of like, in my 50s, and I'm told, even now I get chills thinking about it, because you're just sort of, I thought I was a healthy, regular specimen. And all of a sudden I'm told this, and I'm thinking, and he said, "You have to get a hematology oncologist immediately." And of course, I do have to tell you something that was very funny. The mind does strange things. It took me quite a while before I would say I have MDS, but never did I say I had cancer. It wasn't until my kids said, "Mom, you have cancer." I said, No. I have MDS, and it's they said, "You have cancer. This is called blood cancer." And your mind just doesn't, because when someone tells you that you have cancer, that's way too frightening, and my mind couldn't take it in. So I just had MDS. So I went looking for a doctor. And I walked in to a hospital in Chicago that I never go to, and met Dr. Azra Raza. And it was sort of like the two of us just connected immediately. She was brilliant. She was wonderful. And she was so positive. She and I clicked, because I said, "I have no intention of not living. I am going to, I understand that I can't ever win with this. And I understand that it will someday get me," which somehow or other I seem to be okay. Well, more or less. And she was all about living. And so we connected. And that's when my whole journey began, which was, and over the years, I would tell you that I don't think there's a protocol that I haven't had. I haven't been on. I've had chemo twice, 2 different types. There isn't, the drugs. And for years, she was in Chicago, and then she moved to New York.
Yep.
And she was at many different hospitals. And for a time, she was with Harvard. I used to commute to Massachusetts. She then went to New York, and she was with the hospital there. I commuted. Then she went to Columbia in New York. And sometimes I would commute every 2 weeks. Sometimes it was every 4 weeks. When you're on a protocol, even if it's just, sometimes it was shots, sometimes it was all different things. But even if it's just pills, you have to go to the hospital. They have to hand you the pill, and then you have to fly home. They cannot send it to your hospital in Chicago.
Wow.
Sometimes I'd be very sick afterwards. I was getting bone marrow biopsies on a very regular basis at that time. And it was my way of life. But she knew that for me, and for her too, it was all about lifestyle. So I did everything possible that this is what I had to do, but we did it in ways. If I had to commute to New York, I would go on one day, and if I could, I'd fly home the same day. If not, I'd stay and have dinner with Azra. We became very, very close. but we were always a team. She always made me feel like I was part of this. It was a journey that we were doing together. And if there was something, and I would tell you that every single protocol that I was on, I always got sick. I always, after a time, had to stop. And she'd say, no problem, we'll find another one. And go through the whole process again. And as she says, none of them actually cured me, but everyone did a little something. I also started getting transfusions, which she immediately, and I don't know if you all know about what chelating.
No, don't assume people. I barely knew what it was when you told me last week. So,
well, when you get transfusions, you have an iron overload because my body doesn't, at this point, my bone marrow doesn't make any red cells. They were all mature and they die.
Oh.
So all the blood.
Is that basically what MDS means?
Yes. Yeah.
Your bone marrow does not make red blood cells.
That's correct.
So that doesn't sound like it would work out for.
It makes red blood cells, but they're all immature and they die.
Oh.
So they're
baby blood cells that can't do much.
That's exactly right. So
that doesn't sound like you would have a very good day if all of your blood cells were not doing their job.
You get extremely anemic. And when you're very anemic, it means that if you get up and you walk from here to there, it's like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. You're just exhausted. You have trouble breathing, all that kind of stuff. So Azra always knew that for me, it was about how I lived, quality of life. And so she allowed me to have a lot of transfusions. The general public meaning the general doctors, most of them believed try and have as few transfusions as possible, because when you have a transfusion, here's the problem. I get all of this blood. My body doesn't use any of the iron because I don't have bone marrow that uses the iron. So the iron builds up, and iron is fatal.
So if your bone marrow was healthy, it would absorb the iron and do something with it and make mature blood cells. But that process is broken. So it accumulates iron, which could kill you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so, it's a slow process, but the worry is that, you will die from the iron. And my feeling was always, well, I don't mean to sound, but I do feel that for me, it's all about living. I'm not afraid of dying. This is terrible to say, but if I'm dead, I'm dead. But how can you live? When you're living, you want to have a life and live. And so I kept saying, it's okay, but I want to go for the living. And also Azra would encourage me. She and I would sort of figure out, every single time I would get really sick, I'd say, I can't do this anymore. She'd say, it's okay. We'll find another one. Perfectly fine. And she did. She always did. This went on for years and years, but then she's still doing it. I'm going on a new 3 weeks, I guess. I'm going to start having a bag that's going to be on the side I'm going to wear to chelate, to keep pulling out iron.
Oh.
Because right now I chelate every day. I take pills that chelate, but it's not good enough. So now they're going to do this, because after all these years, you can imagine that my iron levels are astronomical.
Wow.
So, but the really good news is that I've had a lovely life. I have 3 children. I just had my 11th grandchild, which is pretty exciting, about 3 days ago. But I guess for me, the message that Azra always gave to me was, you may be sick and you may have cancer, but that doesn't mean that you can't live. And that every day, and she encouraged me, every day you get up and you say, I have 2 choices, right? I either stay in bed because I feel like horrible. And then what am I going to do? Stay in bed for the rest of my life? Or you get up and you say, I can do this, and you put one foot in front of the other. And sooner or later, you start feeling better. I mean, you just do, because you won't allow anything else. So it's been a journey for me, because Azra and I have been together now for 35 years. And of course, I have to get I get transfusions every 2 weeks, sometimes every 3 weeks. So she's in contact with my doctors at Northwestern, and it's just how I live. I'm at the hospital twice a week, but you need to know that I have a lovely life. And when I'm not at the hospital, I'm out doing everything.
You're a member of the golf club.
Yes. Well, I told you I started golf at age 75.
It's a good age to start golf. Yeah.
I mean, how many sports can you start at age 75? My point, and this is so sort of Pollyanna of me, but I really believe that you never stop, right? As soon as one door closes, other things open. And now at this age, I can play golf. I've taken a bridge. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do. And, I don't play tennis anymore because that is not something I can do. So anyhow.
So back me up.
Yes.
Your doctor says you've got MDS, and there's a circuit in your brain that probably didn't hear the cancer part.
It absolutely did not.
And then your family grabbed you by the lapels and said, Mom, you've got cancer. So.
Oh, wait, my daughter all of a sudden brought me 6 books on how to live with cancer. And I said, what are you doing? So go ahead.
Okay. So then, step us through a little more slow-mo. What you had to somehow absorb that and somehow decide what you're going to do about that, or how you're going to think about it.
Yeah.
Some people just are run over by a truck.
Well, I guess my first, as you can see, was total denial. There was no question. I thought, oh, come on. I mean, not me. And then first, I don't know why, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. Either you live or you don't live. What was I going to do? Lay down and just say, okay, this is it? I mean, I had children and a life and a profession. And I just thought, no. As long as I'm alive, I'm going to be out there.
Was Azra the first doctor you saw?
No. I interviewed a number of doctors, and over the years, I've had many doctors, many doctors. In the beginning, I interviewed a number of doctors, and I fell in love with Azra right away because she was so positive. And I will also tell you, over the years, it's amazing to me that I mean, she's in New York and I'm in Chicago, and she's so available. I mean, I have all sorts of other doctors, and it's really hard to reach them, or it's hard to do. Azra, if I text her, if I call her, she's there, she answers. And here she's probably much more brilliant and more well-known and more fantastic.
Famous.
She absolutely is.
She's famous, yeah.
She absolutely is. And she is there for every single one of her patients, every single one, and gives you so much hope, and you don't give up with her, ever.
Well, I've been all over the country with her, and I've sat next to her a whole bunch of times when we're in a car or we're in a hotel or something, and she's getting texts or she's calling her patients. I don't think most doctors give patients their personal cell phone numbers.
As I told you, I mean, this started when I was in my 50s. And then I have a lot of grandchildren, and I always had a lot of little ones. And I'd be driving around my grandkids, they'd be in the back seat, and Azra would call me, and she would hear my kids, and everybody's like, screaming and laughing, and Azra's on the phone. I mean, she becomes part of the family.
So I remember you said something about the outfit Azra was
Oh,
wearing
yes.
the first day you met her.
Yes.
I think it tells you something about her. What's that story?
Well, I interviewed all these other doctors, and they all come out, in the white jackets and the whole thing. And I walk in to see Azra, and she does not have on a white coat, and she's really dressed beautifully. And she looks at me and she says, "Oh, I love your bag." I thought, she didn't say, "Let's talk about your illness." She didn't say, "You're not looking so healthy," or "Can I help you?" or "How do you feel?" Or she talked about, well, for me, it was talking about life. And, that of all things to say to me, the first thing she says is, "I like your bag." And I thought, "Oh, okay, you're for me." We're not talking about, we're getting down to the fun stuff.
So you've told me about most doctors have a authoritarian attitude. Me, doctor, you, patient. I tell you what to do, you
Yeah.
do it. And that's not worked for you. And you have a different view of what the patient doctor relationship should be like.
I feel so strongly about this because I think that if you don't, as a patient, feel that you have some control over your body, if you don't feel that you have some sort of effect on what's going to happen, you feel that you're just being done to. And you become almost like, a victim is not the right word, but you certainly feel that you're like, "Oh, okay, whatever you say, I'll do it. Oh, okay." And they take away your presence, and they take away that you too can have feelings, and you too can say, "Hey, I don't really want to do this because this doesn't feel good," or "I'm not feeling well. Can we, from this protocol, can we move on?" And when you have a part and you feel that someone's listening to you and you're part of the treatment, it gives you a strength, and it gives you feel like you're living, you're just not some puppet. And well, it one of my personal peeves is when, and this happens all the time, but with different doctors, I'll get a my chart that will say, "Here, this is your appointment, and you must be here at 12 o'clock on Wednesday." And guess what? If I have a lunch date on Wednesday, I call them and I say, "I'm very sorry, but I can't be there at 12 o'clock." Because the lunch date is more important to me because I have this for the rest of my life. So you've got to fit into my life so that I can still live. Because what good is it if all I'm doing is spending all my life at the hospital? Who needs it?
So lunch dates always supersede
Oh,
oncology appointments.
no question.
Well, that's a reversal.
I know, bad me. And I do things at 7 in the morning if I can. I get transfusions at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and transfusions can go on for 3-4 hours. But you have to plan. If you don't plan your life, nobody else cares, and you're at the hospital 24/7. And then how can you feel good about yourself? You've got to feel that you're still amongst the living.
So you interview some doctors, you start with Azra. So what was the first couple of years of getting treated for MDS like? Like what happened and how did your family respond to this and what was
Well,
going on?
you can imagine my family responded in that. I told you my daughter got me books on cancer and started saying, "You have cancer, you have cancer." I mean, they were all very upset. And the first few years were hard because you're going downhill. I mean, I started not needing transfusions, and I started just going in and getting shots, and then the shots didn't work. And then I graduated to transfusions, and I was getting transfusions, and then I had to get more transfusions and more transfusions and more transfusions. And this was over a period of a number of years. And then until you really get into a rhythm. I mean, I was constantly being stuck, and then I didn't have any more veins. And finally, I got a port, which makes life so much better because then it can just access the port. But it's a constant until you adjust to this is the way my life is going to be. And of course, protocols are difficult. But I've always felt that there's a lot that's very difficult, but there's also a lot of days that you feel okay. And you just cherish those days. And here I am, 86 and still alive.
So give us some kind of an idea of, so 5 years and then 10 and then 15 and 20, like what changes over, can you give us a sense of the meandering?
I mean, I can and I can't because it all, I started, it was a number of years before I had to have transfusions, but I was having to go, I started out I think I was going to the hospital once every 4 weeks. And then I was going to the hospital once every 3 weeks and once every 2 weeks. And then I had my first transfusion, which was many years into it. When they tell you that the shots aren't working anymore and meds you're on don't work and you've now got to have transfusions. And then it's not a straight path. The path goes like this. Something works for a little bit and then it doesn't. I had many run-ins with, were times where I was getting transfusions weekly, twice a week, because things weren't working. And it's a very up and down, nothing goes just downhill, but it is, it's gradually on the downhill slant. I tend to blur things, I tend to try and live today. And so, I mean, it wasn't easy. I would tell you, I can't tell you how many years I commuted back and forth to New York, many, many years. I mean, you just do it because you have to. It's not an alternative. And now I'm pretty, well, I do have to start this new thing, which I am not happy about. But of course, Azra said, you will do it because, you will do it. And I said, I will do it. But that's the other thing. I only will do so much. If something starts interfering with my lifestyle, then it's like, let's find another way. There's got to be another way we can do this. And Azra will always work with me and say, okay, I understand that what you want to do is you want your lunches. And we will make sure that you can keep doing that. And that's what she does.
You mentioned that sometimes Azra and other doctors have had you appear at their events.
Yes.
Or you'd be on a panel or something. And I asked you, so what do people ask you from the audience, or like when they come and talk to you during a break, what do they ask you? I thought you had a pretty interesting answer.
Well, first of all, I have absolutely no idea what I told you, but because who remembers? It was only a week ago. I mean, like really, but no, it's usually the reason that it's always been and actually made me feel good to be able to do this is because these people, it's always people who have MDS and they always come up to me and feel hopeful. And I tell them, you can have a life just because you have a diagnosis that you have cancer. And you can live every single day till you die, and it's okay. And they feel so hopeful because they see that here I am sitting in front of them. And I've lived all of this time. And I have children and grandchildren, and I travel and, I do things and I go and they just, I think, and usually people will say, is it okay if I call you? And, can I email you? And I always say, of course, but I feel so good because I give them, just because someone's telling you this doesn't mean that your life is over. And so they see me sitting up there and feel good about it.
Well, that's what I remember about the first time you told, is that a lot of these people, they feel like they've been smacked down, like with a baseball bat.
Right.
And maybe they don't even really know. No, you can get up and you can fight this. You don't have to just capitulate to.
Right.
And we talked about, there's the medical system, the attitude of the doctors, like the way everything's kind of set up steers people in the direction of capitulation. And you felt like that's almost like the disease of the system is. Can you tell more about what you've seen and what you felt about that?
The first thing that is outrageously important, and of course I was lucky because, Azra is and was and is my doctor, and she made it easy for me that it was a partnership. And it was a partnership from day one. And I think that as the patient, you need to feel that you have some authority about your own body and about what's being done to you, and that you can also make decisions, and you have a right to say no or yes. And so Azra gave me that power, that she always said, it's a partnership. We are doing this together. And so she did this for me, which was sort of amazing. And the other thing that, and I guess I shouldn't say this because all the
Say it anyway.
Doctors are going to go, you shouldn't say this. I can't tell you the amount of patients, MDS patients, and that will call me and say, well, listen, I really did great. I was able to go 3 weeks without a transfusion. I mean, that was, oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. And I would say, and exactly why did you do that? I mean, are you feeling better? And they'd say, well, no, the last week I was not feeling good at all. And I really had to just sort of hang around in bed and couldn't do much.
So can you explain I get a transfusion, and then what's the next few weeks like? And then I get can you, what is going on with you physically while you're trying to not get a transfusion?
Well, I think that everybody's probably different. And I can only talk from my own personal, and I've been very lucky. And, I can't say, I don't know if I'm just very lucky, or I can't say that this will happen for everyone else, but I get a lot of transfusions. I mean, if my hemoglobin, and this may not mean anything to anybody, but doctors will be hysterical. If my hemoglobin is 9 or below, I get a transfusion. Now, I think it's 12 is what a woman's hemoglobin should be. But
Okay.
most doctors absolutely allow patients to get down to 8 in the 7s. And for me, that's happened a number of times, and I won't allow that.
And when you're down to a 7, what does it feel like?
Getting out, just sitting up and trying to get out of bed is something you can't do.
Wow.
I mean, walking across the room is like, no, I don't think I can do that. You just sort of come up to a wall and go, and you're sleeping, actually my kids used to say, because they're very much they always wanted me to live. And my daughter in the beginning would say, why don't you do this? You have 2 good weeks and then spend the 3rd week in bed. Doesn't that make sense? And you live that much longer. And I would go, no. I will not do that. I'll take the shorter path, but I don't want to spend that week in bed every 3rd week.
And is it true, maybe you said this, but if you get too many transfusions, your iron can go too high and it can kill you. And this is why people try to go as long as they can.
Absolutely.
And you're like, I'd rather drop than just spend every third week in bed.
Yes, true. Absolutely true. And listen, just not that long ago, I was going, it's getting too close to home. I don't want any of my doctors to hear this. Azra can, not the others. But I was going to be out of town for the weekend, and I had my hemoglobin, CBC at Monday. And I'm trying to remember, I think that my hemoglobin was 9. Maybe it was 8.9. I don't remember. They're very close. And I said, I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to California. I do not want a transfusion. And they said, so my doctor called me and said, I want to tell you that I absolutely am telling you, you should not get a transfusion. This is very dangerous. Da, 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 da. And I said, give me the blood. And I did. And I had a wonderful weekend. Now, I will tell you that if it were Azra, she would have said, I understand what you're saying. And I understand that for you, for me personally, that kind of risk is worth the reward. But for your average doctor, that is not a risk that they will take. Now, she did. She said, you'll have to sign off on this. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. It does take a lot of perseverance to say, give me the blood.
You know what this is reminding me of? It's reminding me of accountants. Let me explain this. The very first accountant I ever had when I was like 22 said, I've never, ever been audited. And I thought that was good. Well, when I got older and I got more into business, what I understood, this is an extremely risk-averse person. What you want is an accountant that says, I've been audited many times, and I will defend you against whatever tax return I fill because I am aggressive about getting you tax deductions, and I will go right up to the line, and then it'll flag somewhere, and then I will go to the IRS and I'll say, see, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and I'll defend it. And that's a good accountant.
Totally.
And so the doc is the same thing with the doctors. Like they don't want you to take any risk that could make them look bad.
Well,
They'd rather
that's harsh. I think that's harsh. I think you're right. But I do think that that's harsh because I think that doctors, their goal in life is to keep you healthy.
Yeah.
And to do what they can. And there is a risk. And I don't mean to sound so, just
you're not dismissive of the concern.
Right. And I do have to say, I'm okay with it because for me, that's what's important. But these doctors, their goal is to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And so they work very hard at that. And they're right. They're not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a huge amount of iron right now, and I've been chelating every day of my life for the last, 25 years. And so now I have to go to something else. That was my decision. For me, it was an easy decision. And I wasn't like, it was just, there was no decision. It was just how I lived. But I do get where most doctors are coming from. I think Azra, first of all, is much more into a partnership, and she hears what you're saying and works with you as a patient. And that was sort of an amazing quality that a doctor has.
Well, she is deciding to exercise influence in her relationship with the patient rather than authority.
Yeah, that's true. Although she says things.
Well, she's as authoritative as they come.
You're right.
But she doesn't default.
You're right.
To, I have a PhD, I went to medical school.
Right.
She defaults to, there's a sense in which you are equals.
Yeah. And she will tell you it's a partnership.
Yeah.
And it's been a partnership all these years with the two of us. And, it's so amazing that I found her. And of course I followed her all over the United States, but she's a unique person. And she also believes in, she's now going to cure cancer. And I have to tell you that if anybody can cure cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she is going to cure cancer.
Yeah, there's no question. I am
100% convinced.
Oh, yeah. And she can do these things.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And for the same reason, and it's interesting because she's that brilliant, but she still listens to me as a person and hears where my goals are.
So let's both of us talk about, why do you think that being a really good bedside manner partner with patients makes her such a great scientist? And before you answer, I want to point out, most doctors are either a doctor or they're a scientist. So there's cancer scientists, and they got genetics and petri dishes and organoids and all the rest, and it's lab work. And then there's doctors that see patients every day. I don't have any idea the number, but I wouldn't guess it's any more than 5%, maybe 1% of doctors that see patients also have a science lab. So she's very unusual in that regard. But so that's kind of the setup. But why do you think that being good with patients makes her a great scientist?
Yeah, that's very interesting because, of course, I'll tell you some funny stories about that. But
Let's hear them.
No, but I do think she has such a wide knowledge and a wide scope. And so by hearing what patients have to say, it's giving you a whole new dimension on what this disease means.
Yeah.
And how it's affecting you and what it's doing to me. I mean, she understands that when my hemoglobin is low, I don't want to live like that. And what does it mean when your hemoglobin is low? How are you living? How do you feel? I think all of that, taking that into account as part of the science, is very important because she's hearing the ways that this is affecting me in my body, and she actually is hearing it. And I think it's giving her the whole picture so that she can deal with it in a scientific way. The story I was going to tell you is that the two people that worked with her for all the years that I've been with her and were in her research and used to do all the research. And every time I did a bone marrow biopsy, they would take extra for research, et cetera, et cetera. And all these people were. And then one of them moved to Chicago, and Azra said, "You've got it." She set us up and said, "You have to meet her." And I met her, and she was like, "Oh my God, I know every single thing about you, and I've never known who you were."
Mm.
And it was, she felt so, all she knew me was from a petri dish. And all of a sudden she saw the actual, and I think she felt like this gave her another whole dimension on what this petri dish and the research with this meant in real life.
I have my own version of that. You know what it is? I get this person's email address, and they're on my email list, or they're a client, or they buy stuff every now and then. And then I go to a seminar, I actually meet the real person. Like, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
You're not just this ATM machine that exists out there somewhere in the world. You're actually, you have freckles, or
Exactly. You're short.
Or you have crow's feet, or
right,
You're shorter, you're tall.
right, exactly.
You have an accent.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, she looked at me like, she said, I've studied you for all these years. And of course, I'm looking at her and thinking, oh my God, you feel sort of exposed in a funny way.
So I have my own take on why I think Azra is going to cure cancer. And I'll start with my mentor, James Shapiro at the University of Chicago, who taught me evolution. He went to Harvard and studied English for his undergrad, and then he went to Cambridge and got a master's in genetics. Now, English major to genetics, that's kind of a weird path. And one day I asked him, does that have anything to do with why you have such an unconventional view of biology? And he said, yes. They were never allowed to tell me what I was not allowed to think.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Well, and I think it goes deeper than that, because I think his study of literature gave him a much wider sense of narrative, so that he did not become locked in to the narrative that everybody gives you in school.
Well, I hate to interrupt you, but you're talking about Azra.
That's exactly that's where I'm going next.
Yeah.
So Azra she loves poetry. Like, she ingests huge amounts of poetry. If you go to her house, she must have at least 5,000 books.
Oh, minimum. Walls from floor to ceiling.
And she's read every one of them.
Yeah. Every single one.
And when she goes to a city, like she came to Chicago last June, and she said all she had to do was tell the South Asia Institute, which is like the Indian Pakistani community,
yeah.
Hey, I'm going to be in town, and they will immediately invite her to come and do a poetry reading.
Right.
And so if you go to one of these things, you'll get this mix of Urdu and English, and she'll do these. And
she tells you she's memorized all these poems, and she tells you it all in both languages.
Yes. And my favorite professor, when I was 20 years old, he was an English professor, and he was the most respected professor on the campus. Like, he was amazing. Everybody wanted to get into his classes, and I managed to get into one of his classes. And he said, whenever I meet a pre-med student, I have advice for them. I say, you need to read novels.
I love it.
And he said, why would I tell a medical student to read novels? And he said, here's why. 70% of what's wrong with anybody starts in their head. And if you want to be good at treating patients, you need to understand people.
I love that.
And he said, if you read lots of novels, you will understand people, and you will understand your patients, and you will have a good bedside manner. And the universities are turning out technicians that understand petri dishes, but they do not understand human beings. And those technicians do not make good doctors. And so the reason that I think Azra will cure cancer is, so I'll tell you another story. The first ever conference on polyploid giant cancer cells was at MD Anderson in February earlier this year. And I was there. I was a co-chair of the first morning. I was involved in planning it. And Azra came there and spoke. And when Azra spoke, so this was a great conference and the science was great, but I've been to a bunch of cancer conferences. You almost never see any picture of an actual cancer patient, and you almost never hear an actual story of any cancer patient.
Wow.
You see genomes and petri dishes and cells and charts. She gets up. She tells the story of Andrew, who
Right.
died at age 22,
Right.
her daughter's best friend.
Right.
And she said, people, we are treating cancer patients. We are not just sequencing genomes and publishing papers. And she showed pictures of patients. And I think, and I know this probably it doesn't sound good, but I'll say it anyway. I think it's really easy for a person who only sees a specimen with a barcode and they run it through a machine. It's really easy to kind of forget that we're dealing with human beings here. And it's easy to get caught up into the reward systems of the publishing and the grants and the medical profession and not keep the main thing. And it's so easy. And Azra is so intent on keeping the main thing. And I think her sense of narrative that she gets from poetry, kind of like Jim, it gives her a more accurate, it's almost like that blink reaction of when you, like Malcolm Gladwell talks about, there's calculations that go inside your subconscious that you don't even have access to. And they go, well, that's a real piece of art. Oh, that's an imitation. That's a real, that's fake. That's a counterfeit. That's the real. He said that thing, that's based on everything that's gone in before. I think she has a different set of inputs in the fact that she goes and she does these poetry readings and she meets with patients and she talks to patients. She sees the whole picture so much better. So that's why it's not surprising that she started this tissue repository. So why don't you give us the Donna version, because your tissues are in that repository.
Oh, are you kidding?
Can you
Absolutely.
give us the Donna explanation? What is this tissue repository?
Well, no, she's been collecting my tissues forever and ever. And I
Yeah.
told you that, here was this person that I met that said, oh my God, that's the person I've been studying you for 30 years, for God's sakes.
Yes.
And I mean, it's so amazing. And I also just to get off the subject, because, I love and adore Azra. She isn't just well-read in poetry. I mean, she has friends that are, novelists and playwrights.
Oh, heavens, yes.
I mean, she's like, and she has, there could be a seance at her house. There could be you never know. She used to invite me over if I was in town to, if they had, when, like Sid would come over and when he plays that instrument.
Yeah, the sitar.
Yeah. Sid is Siddhartha Mukherjee, Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee, who has worked with Azra. The two of them worked together for years and years.
And he won the Pulitzer Prize.
And he won the Pulitzer Prize. And he was studying the tissues for years and years and years. And the cute story is that he had been studying me for years. And at least what I was told was that he had never met me. And so he started, years and years and years later, started coming up to do, and he never did this for anyone else, but he would come up and do my bone marrow biopsies, only because first was to see who I was.
Yeah.
To put a body with these petri dishes. He was also very, very good at doing bone marrow biopsies. Yeah. And they didn't hurt quite as much as when he did it.
Okay.
Well, he's fabulous and brilliant and wonderful. And the two of them have been together in this journey forever.
Yeah.
But anyhow, getting back to the point, which was
tell us about this tissue repository.
Well,
and why it's there, and why is it important?
Well, but you realize that no one else in the world has years of this. And she can study. Look, I've had this disease for all these years, and she's got tissues from me all these years that she can go back and just see
So like is every year there's a set of tissues that you contributed and it's in the freezer? Is that kind of?
Well, I would tell you that the last number of years, I haven't had bone marrow biopsies every year. I just do it as necessary. But yes. I mean, for sure, I would say sometimes I had a bone marrow biopsy twice a year.
So that means what Azra has is a longitudinal set of tissues of year after year after year, a bunch of patients with a complete medical record.
That's right.
And they're sitting in freezers, costs $1 million a year just to keep the freezers running, and they're waiting to be analyzed. But when the money is available to study those tissues, somebody can say, I am going to trace the entire history of Donna Meyers MDS from bone marrow sample to bone marrow sample to bone marrow sample. And I can look at all the cells. I can do all the omics and all the analysis, and I can track it to her medical chart. And this is not possible from any other.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. I mean, what she has is irreplaceable. I mean, it's just amazing. The kind of information that she can get from something like this is mind-boggling.
I think there are 6 Nobel Prizes sitting in those freezers.
I agree.
Right now. Yeah. And I want to tell you a story. So we've been out fundraising to get these tissues studied. And I have 2 donors who have both given money to this project. And they would both probably give at least $1 million each if they were absolutely sure that they weren't the only one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Because donors, most wealthy donors who support important causes, they have a concern, which is, I don't want this church, institution, university, hospital, research project, whatever it is, to be exclusively dependent on me. I want this to be spread around. And what I've experienced from lots of fundraising for different things is nobody wants to be first. But once you get a sufficient number of people on board, then the whole thing will go forward. This is exactly how the Evolution 2 prize worked. It took me several years just to get like 3 or 4 people. And then person number 5 came in, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was no problem. Yeah. They just fell like dominoes. This is exactly where we are with funding the study of Azra's tissues.
Yeah, well, it's at the preface. I mean, it's just about to, it's all right there.
It's right on the cusp.
Yeah.
And so if people on the call or are able to contribute like that, or if you know people who want their money to do something really significant, like cure cancer, this is what we're doing.
Now is your time.
Yeah. So Azra is 72. She's ridiculously energetic. There's very finite supply of such talented people in the world.
Oh, and, no question.
And we want her efforts to bear as much fruit as humanly possible in this lifetime.
Oh, and with the right support, there's no question that she is the one. I mean, she is absolutely the one who can cure cancer.
Yeah.
As she says, one cell at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I mean, her whole theory is so correct that it isn't like you can cure cancer because there are so many different cancers. So you have to cure cancer at that first cell.
Right.
And it makes so much sense, and it's so logical, because every different cancer is a different disease. So you've got to get to it.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for a person? So like there's a gentleman on the call who emailed me about 4 days ago, and he said, my mother has pancreatic cancer. And well, I gave him my sympathies and I said, well, why didn't you get on the call today? And I saw him. So he's on the call. But what would you say to either him or his mom or anybody else in the call that's like him or his mom, where it's either the person or it's somebody right next to you, and there's this overwhelming temptation to
Give up. I mean, I try to be careful what I say, because not everybody likes to hear what I have to say, because it isn't that I don't have, I have enormous amount of sympathy. And yes, somebody with pancreatic cancer is very, very serious. And probably there's not a whole lot that can be done. I mean, I feel terrible about that. But my whole feeling in life is that if your mother is still here and alive, cherish it. I mean, I sound like sort of a Pollyanna, but it's like, cherish every moment that you have together. If you can go out and have a lunch, have a lunch. If she loves a cinnamon roll, get her the cinnamon roll. I mean, just don't worry about, oh my God, you shouldn't eat sugar, and just do whatever you can, make memories and enjoy every minute, because tomorrow you can say, we had a wonderful day yesterday. We went shopping and we really had a good time. We had a milkshake. How fun was that? And so it's just, I'm all about living. So
tell us about the $100,000 bars in your room over there.
my candy room.
Yeah, tell us about your candy room.
No. Oh my God, I love it. No, I am a firm believer. I started this because I moved into this condo and there was this bar, and I thought, I don't want a bar. What am I going to do with a bar? And I decided that, being that I have all these grandchildren, I had to have a candy room, because what's more happy than a candy room? And of course, the candy room had to be all junk candy, right? Because that's the best. I mean, who doesn't love junk candy? And so I started this candy room, and it started with my grandkids, who loved it, right? Because you go in there and whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I am a firm believer that it's so much fun. I mean, I understand that you want to have your diets and you're healthy, but guess what? Candy's, I mean, it's okay. It's great.
It's okay to have a little candy
every now and then. And I think the thing I get such a kick out of is that I work out all the time, because, I'm old and I have to. In order to keep going, you've got to work out. At least that's how I feel. And so I have these trainers that come to the house. And I thought, oh, they're going to go, oh my God, a candy room. How terrible of you. They love my candy room. Every single person who comes in. So it's just the whole idea that life should be whatever makes you happy. And that doesn't mean that you don't watch yourself and you don't do things within reason. But for heaven's sakes, just go out and have some junk candy.
So I want to open this up for some questions. I'm sure you could raise your hand and we could turn on your mic and camera, or you can type questions in. As we wrap up here, I think probably a few people would like to talk to Donna or ask her a few things. If you'd like to support Azra's work, you can go to reversingcancer.org, and you'll find there's donation links and there's explanations of exactly what we're doing. Reversingcancer.org. And if you want to talk to us directly, email John, Jon at reversingcancer.org, and John Carell will get you whatever information you need. And yeah, does anybody want to talk to Donna? Kelly, go ahead and unmute.
Hey, so I have 3 words to toss at you, and I'm curious what your answers are to this. So, the 3 words are backbone, optimism, and grief. And I would say there are people who, in their interactions with a doctor, even in their routine appointments, let alone, in a situation where you're really facing a major health challenge, their attitude would be sort of characterized as submission and obedient. And you are definitely discussing a more of a partnership and backbone in terms of your own sense of your own agency. And there are also people in the world who tilt pessimistic, even without enormous challenges. They just sort of always see the world as in like, well, that's the way it is. I can never catch a break, right? You talk much more optimistically in general, it sounds like. So I'm curious, like in terms of your life history before you got this diagnosis, whether that backbone factor was always a part of the feature of your personality, whether optimism was always a feature of your identity. And then the 3rd word, grief. What experience did you have with grief before this? Because I would think a diagnosis of any major health challenge forces everyone to sort of process through understanding grief in some way, even if it is of the kind of a loss of the kind of health you used to have. So backbone, optimism, and grief, whatever you want to say about any of that.
Oh, I love that. I feel, of course, I've had grief, and I had a grandchild who died at a very young age, well, teenager. And, a lot of grief. We all do. And my feeling is the longer you live, no one can get up through a life without unscathed. I mean, these things happen. And we all experience grief. And it's part of life. I mean, it is what it is. Optimism, I sort of feel that you can't, how do you live without optimism? I mean, you have to have, otherwise you just curl up and die. And I don't care how bad something is, you still can feel like, I just saw that sunset, or I just found a friend and we had a wonderful conversation, or, there's all sorts of things that you can appreciate that keep you optimistic. And backbone, yeah, it's funny. I sort of have lived this way most of my life. When I was a young person, I had very severe asthma. And this is sort of a strange story, but I was told that the one thing I couldn't do is I could never ride horses because I'm allergic to hay. And I went to a camp and I thought, how can somebody tell me that I can't do something? Right. But I wasn't allowed to ride horses. So every day I would go and sit in that barn with all the hay because I knew this was exactly what I wasn't supposed to do. And to be very honest, I got sick every single night. Right. But I came home and I said to my parents, look, I want to tell you what I did. I didn't tell them that I got sick every night, but I said, so don't tell me that I can't ride horses. And I think that I've always felt that way about life. Don't let someone tell you you can't do it. It's risk and reward, right? So you got to decide if it's worth it to you, do it. And take the consequences. It's okay, but you just lived. So I hope that sort of answers.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Well, if there's not more, I think this has been a great conversation. I really love the fact that you told your story and that we have it out.
I'm a little embarrassed. I mean, this is the first time that I've actually ever done this. And it's like, I don't know if I want my family to hear it or not. I'm not sure.
Well, you get to decide if you're going to tell them about it.
Right.
But I just really appreciate you telling your story and encouraging people who, may feel like they just got smacked down with a baseball bat. Yep, you can get up.
Right.
And you can be courageous.
Well, I always felt that it's not being courageous. I always felt that it's just choice.
Mm.
And there's two choices. And, are you going to choose the choice to live, or are you going to choose the choice to wait to die? So for me, it was pretty easy. Not heroic at all.
I have no intention of not living. What a beautiful statement to own on every level. Yeah. Well, Donna, this has been great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Appreciate you. Bye now.
Bye.
Until next time, this is the Evolution 2.0 podcast, bridging science, technology, business, and the big questions. To ensure you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or on your preferred player. If you like the show, rate us on iTunes. Join our email list and social media at cosmicfingerprints.com.